I've been working with Ted Michalos for over 22 years, so I know that one of his favorite sayings is, "No good deed goes unpunished." What does he mean by that? We're going to find out starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Ted, welcome back. You and I started working together, I believe, in 1997. You do the math in your head.
I think it was 98.
I think it might have been 98. I'm not sure. And we were, you were working at Coopers and Lybrand, and I got hired to go work there as well. And so we've been working together for many years. That was back up in their Waterloo office.
Yep.
And then, of course, they merged with Price Waterhouse to become Price Waterhouse Coopers. And we said, we're out of here.
And your office was in the back of your car
That's
for 6
true.
months.
I was just on the, yeah, that's right. I knew we were leaving, so we were already planning to get out of there. So we started Hoyes Michalos in January of 1999 is when we opened our doors. January 4th. So here we are 20 years later. And I know that in those 20 years, I've heard you say this many, many times, no good deed goes unpunished.
At least once a day.
At least once a day. Now, that seems like a pretty negative and derogatory kind of saying. Why is it that you like to say that saying? What does it mean to you?
Well, it's a cautionary tale. I mean, the world is such that it is, you have to help your fellow neighbor, you have to be good to your fellow man, but you have to recognize that when you're going to do a self-sacrificing act, it involves some sacrifice. And the thing is to make sure that you're not putting yourself at risk when you're helping all these other people.
That's the key, to make sure you're not putting yourself at risk. So I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree. We've got a responsibility to help others.
Yep.
Absolutely agree with that, but at the same time, you don't want to get yourself into trouble. So let's go through some examples, and this is taken from real life people we've dealt with, of how helping others can get yourself into trouble, and then obviously we're going to give some advice on how to still help others with not getting into trouble. So example number one, and I see this all the time, I'm sure you do too, elderly parents helping their kids. So, and this maybe isn't parents and kids, maybe it's lending money to a family or friend or something like that. So how can this cause problems? What type of situations have you seen in this realm?
Well, so if you make the comparison that lending people money is just like giving an alcoholic the next drink, or giving crack to the kid on the schoolyard, you're empowering them to maintain an activity that probably isn't healthy for them, something that's not good. And that's a little harsh when I'm saying it, but I'm trying to make an extreme example. So if your adult child comes to you and they need money because they're not being able to cope with their financial situation, by giving them money, you're not teaching them to correct the problem. And what's worse, if you borrow yourself to give them that money, you've now fallen into the same trap. They've dragged you into the hole.
Yeah, and that's a huge problem. If I've got $20 and someone wants to have it, there you go, here's $20. I'm not putting myself into a hole. But if I have to borrow,
we're not talking about $20.
No, it's always
$20,000.
It's always a lot bigger. So, how do you know where to draw the line then? So, I mean, I'm a parent. You're a parent.
Yep.
We want to help our kids.
Well, one of my other famous sayings is you never stop being a parent. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're alive and you've got children, you're going to be a parent.
And so, let's say that my kid is an adult, has gone through some tough times, lost their job, they got sick, whatever. Then helping them out isn't a problem. That's kind of what parents do.
Right.
Where are you saying then that I need to draw the line?
Well, so when helping your children causes you to incur or make changes that you didn't anticipate, you didn't plan for. So if you've got money in a savings account and your kid, they've gone through a marital breakdown and they need to set up shop again, they've got to furnish their apartment, they've got to reestablish their life, you're going to help them because you're a parent.
Very common example, yep.
But if you have to tap into your line of credit or you put it all on your credit cards without a plan for you to deal with it, then all you've done is make their problem your problem, and you're both in trouble.
And that's not helpful to anybody then.
Right.
So what about the case then of not actually giving them money but co-signing for them?
Well, I think co-signing is actually worse than lending them the money. Co-signing, you're basically saying, I'll help you get approval on the debt, and if you can't pay it, I will. And almost invariably, perhaps it's because of the people that we see, you end up having to pay on the debt. So if someone's credit isn't worthy to get approval by themselves, then that's probably not the correct answer. If you've got to help somebody borrow money, then they really shouldn't be borrowing the money. And I know that sounds hard, but it's the truth.
And so, again, how do I decide whether I should help someone by co-signing a loan? So you take a look at the real estate market, and we're recording this in the fall of 2019. So the real estate market is still relatively robust. To buy a tiny little condo in Toronto costs $9 million. So it's very hard for a 25, 35-year-old, 30-year-old person to be entering the housing market, and yet parents have funds, hey, they've owned a house for 30 years, they've got lots of equity built up. Is it a problem for a parent to be co-signing a mortgage for a kid?
Well, again, if you are co-signing, it means the person that was trying to borrow in the first place didn't qualify on the strength of their own signature, which means the lender didn't think that they were financially able to deal with the payments that they were trying to incur. I think that's a huge warning sign just in of itself. If they don't have enough credit history, that's different. But if they need a co-signer because it doesn't look like they can afford the payments, then they shouldn't be borrowing the money.
So there's a dividing line right there. So somebody who has, just moved to a new city, they've started a new job, they're going to be making really good money, they can quite easily afford the payments, but they don't have the credit history. Okay, maybe that's not a bad time to be co-signing for somebody.
Right.
But if, as you say, no, they can't qualify and never would be able to qualify, then you're leading them down the path, then, is what you're doing.
Well, and you're leading yourself down the path. I mean, you're not actually helping somebody if you're setting them up to fail. And so if you're getting them approval on a loan payment that they know they're not going to be able to make, either you're going to have to start making the payments or they're going to lose the house anyway. I mean, it's a bad situation you're making worse.
So what about putting someone as a co-borrower on my credit card?
Co-borrowing doesn't actually increase their credit score the same way that it increases yours. So I'm not sure the goal here is the objective just to give them access to your credit.
So I guess I'm really loaning them money,
correct,
giving them access to money. So really it's the same situation once again then.
It is. And again, you never stop being a parent. So if your decision is that you're going to help your children or your child through this sort of thing and you set aside money and you've planned to do it, I'm not going to tell you not to do that. What I'm warning people about is when you do it when it wasn't planned for and you're tapping into your own resources, or worse, you're borrowing yourself to make this happen. You're not doing anybody any favors when you do that.
Yeah, and I can think of many cases. I can think of a few specifically where the person came in to see me and they were an older person. They might have been in their 60s or 70s, something like that. Not that 60's old, Ted. I want to imply
not
that
yet it
here.
is. Oh, yes, it still is for another couple of years.
That's right. There we go. So, but somebody who's 70, they're retired, and their adult child got into some kind of difficulty, so they went out, they got a line of credit, they helped them, but now because they're on a fixed income, they can't make the payments on that. They've got $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of debt that they've incurred, and now they're coming in to see me because they don't know what to do. I mean,
well, and those people are almost invariably afraid to tell their kids that they've overextended themselves and they're in trouble. I mean, the majority of those seniors that we see end up filing a consumer proposal, so they repay a portion of the debt, and that's great. It solves their problem, but it limits what they can do in the future, and it means the retirement years that were supposed to be golden, well, now they're kind of
because they're dealing with debt. And I say to them, well, tell me the story. And they say, well, the story was I loaned the money to my kid. They were going to pay me back when they got back on their feet, but they haven't been able to pay me back. Things are still tough for them. So here we are. So obviously that was a serious problem. Okay, so now it's time to talk about.
Oh, yes. It's in the book.
It's in the book. Myth 21.
We haven't brought up the book for a couple of shows.
We haven't. So there's the commercial, still available in finer bookstores everywhere and online. Straight Talk on Your Money. The biggest financial myths and mistakes and how to avoid them. Myth number 21. You should always help your family and friends. And so as I say here, the conventional wisdom is if you have the ability to help your family, you should. You should loan your friends and family money because if you can't help those closest to you, who can you help? And so then, of course, I start the chapter by saying never loan money to family or friends. And I still tell the story of Mabel, who was basically, a widow who had helped her adult children and got into trouble. So what is some practical advice? And this show is designed at the person doing the lending, not the recipient of it.
Right.
What is some practical advice then for someone out there who's adult children, for example, have come to them and said, hey, I need some help. I need help with co-signing on a mortgage. I need to borrow some money from you. How do you think through that process?
Well, and so this is going to sound harsh too, but don't make it easy. So if somebody comes to you and says, I just need $20,000 to sort out my problems, and you just give it to them, one, you haven't done your due diligence to see is that actually going to solve the problem. And two, well, if they get into trouble in the future, they may just come back and do it again. Better to say, okay, how did this come about? Take a look at what their situation is. And this is going to sound biased, but I would send them to see somebody like either yourself or myself to see, well, are there better solutions to be doing here?
Yeah. So you're talking about treating the problem, not the symptom.
Correct.
So if I'm moving to a new city, I've got this great new job, but I need a car for my job. Can you help co-sign a car loan? Okay, that seems kind of plausible. And it's obvious it's a one-time thing, and you're going to be able to make the payments because you've got the job. You just don't have the credit to qualify. Okay, that kind of seems like a good risk.
As long as you asked all those questions.
Yeah, you've done you've done your due diligence. But if it's, well, I'm laid off and I've got a bunch of debts I need to pay and I can't pay them, can you help make my debt payments for me? Well, if I help you this month, then I'm doing it next month too.
Right.
And the month after, and the month after, and the month after. So what the money is for is pretty critical to the thought process.
And how it's going to be used. Right. So in the example you just gave where I want to borrow enough money that I can make my payments this month, well, then I got to do it again next month. So maybe you should be looking at a bigger solution anyway. What is the total problem? How much debt have they got? And maybe there's a better solution.
And so I see this happen all the time where the 30-year-old kid has $40,000 worth of debt and mom and dad have been helping him service it.
Right.
So now they're into debt as well. What would have been a better solution for that kid with $40,000 worth of debt?
Well, again, and this may sound harsh, but they should have looked at, should they be filing a consumer proposal or should they be filing bankruptcy? I mean, there are other solutions to consider. The answer that people throw back to me is, yeah, but I'm their parent and I don't want to wreck their credit bureau when they're starting out. But the lesson you're trying to teach them is, I got overextended and these were the solutions to solve it. If you just lend them the money, then the solution you're teaching them is, I'll go see mom and dad and they'll give me the money. That's not much of a solution.
And if mom and dad are rich, then okay, fine. It's your money, do what you want.
Nobody's, yeah.
But if your dad is Warren Buffett, then I guess $40,000 is no big deal.
Right.
But for most of the people we deal with, in my example, $40,000, that's a lot of money. Like that's real money here.
It is.
For everybody. And so the typical proposal we do where you've got $40,000 or $50,000 in debt, maybe you're paying back $10,000, $15,000, $20,000.
Something like that.
Far better than for the parents to help them with the proposal payments.
Right.
If that's what needs to happen, than to be repaying the whole thing. Because if you've got $40,000 or $50,000 worth of debt and you're going to pay that off yourself over the next 5 years, it might cost you $100.
Right.
Because you got credit card interest and all the rest of it.
And even if you feel the need to lend them the 20 as a lump sum, make them pay you back. Put it on some kind of payment terms or some kind of interest so that they learn. And don't you borrow to give them the money. I mean, that's the biggest mistake we always see is that people they incur their own debt to help their kids deal with their debts. And how is that solving the problem?
Well, and I agree. And of course, that's exactly what's discussed on page 193 here, because I have the helping family checklist. And there's only 3 things on the checklist. It's not a very robust checklist. But the first one is, can I afford to help? And you just hit the nail on the head. Am I borrowing money to help? Yeah. Well, that kind of tells me you can't afford to help.
Right. Well, what happens then if something goes wrong for you? Now you've got twice as many people who are going to collapse. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
And then the second item on the list is, will helping help?
Well, that's a tough one.
So, giving your kid money for a 5% down payment to buy a house they can't afford, well, you're not really helping them. You've now helped them incur a whole bunch more debt.
You've empowered them in a bad behavior.
Well,
so now we're back to my whole drinking thing.
Yeah,
which I probably shouldn't have brought up.
And we'll edit that out in post-production.
Thank you.
Even if you don't consider it bad behavior, I mean, I understand you got to have a place to live. The real estate market has been a great investment for the last 10 or 15 years, so I think I'm helping my kid. But there is a monthly cost to owning a house.
Right.
And it's not just the mortgage payment, which sure your kid can afford that. It's
property
all
taxes,
the other things.
Utilities, wear and
repairs
tear,
and maintenance, everything else. And so you've helped your kid get into this house that they couldn't afford on their own. Are you going to be helping them with all the monthly costs going forward? Big question.
Right.
And then the third item on the list is, if I decide to help, how can I protect myself? So you kind of alluded to this already. So so let's say I'm going to give my kid $50,000 towards a down payment. Yep. And I know they've got a really good job. They're going to be able to pay it. I'm not too worried about it. But I want to protect myself at the same time. How would I go about doing that in that scenario?
Well, the logical thing is you'd register a second mortgage on the house. Now, the difficulty you're going to encounter is to get approved for the mortgage, they've got to prove that they've got the down payment, and they may be asked to sign a form saying where that $50,000 came from. And you may then be required to sign something that says it was a gift. All right. So now if you turn around and register a mortgage, things are getting complicated.
Yeah, you got some potential legal issues there. But yes, you're right. It's so there again we get into the chicken and an egg situation. So so you really do have to look at the big picture then. That's what this all comes down to.
As much as being a parent means you want to help your children, part of helping your children is forcing them to make difficult decisions. And so if somebody just comes to you and says, I need $20,000 just to solve my problems, you need to dig a little deeper. Even if you've got the $20,000 in your pocket, do them the service, do them the favor of looking into it further to make sure they're going to learn from the experience. And people are going to say, well, coming to your parents for money the first time isn't easy. Yeah, but if you made it easy, they'll be back for a second time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, we're not advocating one approach or the other. We're advocating you've got to think. And so you're right. If your best friend comes to you looking for some help, well, you're going to do what you can for them.
Right.
But
you got to do it responsibly. You can't just if somebody comes and asks you for help. Well, I'll use an example. My 8-year-old comes to me and says, I don't know how to do my math homework, and I do their homework for them. Great. They get a gold star on their homework, but they don't know how to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. I can use that same example with money. So they've got too much debt. They come to me. They ask me to give them enough money to pay off their debt, and I do it. All right. So what they've learned is that daddy will pay off the debt, and I can go run it up again. And in most cases, they do.
But in your example, you gave the example earlier of, I've gone through, my kid has gone through a marriage separation, and so now they've got to reestablish themselves. And they were doing everything right beforehand. They don't have a whole lot of debt. Maybe they got a car loan or something, but now they've got to go and, buy furniture, first and last month's rent, all the rest of it. And they don't have the cash sitting there.
Yep.
They're reestablishing themselves, so they, maybe didn't have a whole lot of use for credit in the past. So, like, as a parent, are you going to say, well, you're going to have to learn your lesson. I'm not going to give you any money. Go figure it out for yourself. Like, how are you going to handle something like that?
And you'll have to assess at the time what makes the most sense. Because it may very well be that, okay, you should be buying them some furniture as a gift because they're reestablishing their life. Or maybe you should be co-signing, although you should never co-sign for anybody. You're not going to get me on that one.
Well, and I think you kind of made the key point there, and you used the word gift.
Right.
And so that's the conclusion I reach in chapter 21 of the book, that if you want to help people, and I encourage you to help people, then help them by giving them a gift, not a loan.
Right. But make them clearly understand that this is a one-time thing. I'm helping you.
I'm helping you because I know you need help, and I've got the resources to do it. I didn't have to go out and borrow a whole lot of money and put myself into financial jeopardy. Because the issue with giving someone a loan, so, your kid is 25 years old, you loan them $10,000 to do whatever, and they say, yeah, no problem, I'm going to pay you back, I'll give you $300 a month, whatever, till it's paid off. Well, what happens when you're sitting down at Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, and the kid is a couple of months behind on payments? How awkward is that?
Right, or it's worse because they've showed up with a brand new iPhone, or they tell you that they were last weekend they were with their buddies in Montreal.
Yeah, exactly. Or your friend, who's not able to pay you back. So now it's a great way to lose a friend.
Yeah, it certainly changes the dynamic of the relationship, and it doesn't have to be you changing it. It'll change it from their side too, because most people will feel guilty. They'll stop contacting you as frequently. The whole way they interact with you will be different because now there's a lender-borrower dynamic at play.
Yeah, which is it's just worse for everybody. So practical advice then is look at the big picture, figure out how you can specifically help them.
Yep.
And don't get yourself into any trouble doing that.
Correct.
And then we should be good.
No good deed ever goes unpunished.
There you go. That's the title of today's podcast. And again, we want to make it clear here, we're not saying you shouldn't do a good deed.
No.
We're not saying you shouldn't help people. We're just saying you shouldn't put yourself in jeopardy by doing that. And the person you're helping, there's an underlying issue. So your 8-year-old who's having trouble with math.
Right.
Okay, well, maybe it hasn't been explained how that math thing works. Let me see if I can actually treat the underlying underlying problem.
Have you seen the new math?
No, I have not. I suspect your eight-year-old is nailing it though, because I've met her and she's smart.
Spelling actually that's driving me nuts. We could do a whole show on spelling. Folks.
Well, you don't need to know how to spell. It's all on computers.
That's
now,
what the logic seems to be.
So it's all good. So there you go. So Ted, thanks very much for being here.
Always
and I think that's great advice. So again, the key point, and I've tried to drum this home. Yeah, both Ted and I believe you should help people. Right. Absolutely. But you should not put yourself in massive debt to do it. You're not helping them, and you're also harming your future. That's counterproductive. So if someone's got some debt problems, rather than you bailing them out, well, have them talk to a professional. Let's see if there's another answer. If you have the cash to help them, fantastic. Give them the cash. It's a gift. You don't have to pay it back. If they can pay it back in the future, great, but there's no obligation to do that. That way you're not losing a friend or messing up a family relationship. That's our show for today. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. For Ted Michalos, that was Debt Free in 30.